Hello, Natalie. Hello, Roland. And hello, world. Recording a quick video here on the Claude Co-work workshop that I hosted 2 weeks ago. I had a few people reach out to ask if I could record it, and I figured might as well just share it here for whoever wants to build along. So basically what we're going to do is build a simple coaching ecosystem using Claude Co-work, basically having different agents that can coach you through different parts of life, business, or other things that you're currently working on. I will share all the resources also with you and explain a little more about the system later. But the first thing I would recommend you to do is to go to this website over here, norscannerds.vercel.app/self-based. And I will also put that one in the description. And then that should open up this webpage over here. And here you can basically follow through the whole sort of workshop that we're doing. I'm just going to share the theory and briefly walk you through it. And then you can just build in your own time. Total build inside of this session is probably around 2 hours, but at the end over here, there is a much deeper version. That's the one that I created and used, which was approximately, let's say, 3 to 4 days of work setting up the entire ecosystem. But let's start small. So first, a little bit of background context maybe of why I built this and why I use this. So basically, the main use cases that I have for this agent ecosystem is to have different coaches or different experts that help me with different parts of life, business, projects, health, whatever I'm sort of working on. And all of these agents have their own context that they operate from, right? So the intelligence underneath is always the same, like the large language model that's underneath, whether it's Sonnet or Opus, or whether you're using OpenAI or Gemini or any of these other providers. The intelligence is sort of the same engine, but then the context that you give it determines how good the output of the agent is and also how relevant it is to you as an individual. And especially that last part, I think is really, really important and a big reason for me to build this system. So, for example, I might be working on a feature for work. So at the moment, we're working on seeing if we can integrate paywalls into the service at some point. So I am trying to build and demo this feature. Now, what I can then do is take my idea as a not agent, a human, and take it into the business agent. And the business agent is prompted to always think about business angles, business model, monetization, everything that you would need for the business side of things. So this agent might help me think through how can we actually validate the pricing? What would be a good way to validate the pricing? What sort of experiments can we run to see if it should be monthly pricing, if it should be a one-time fee, at what place in the app we might need to place it, what height of pricing, all these different questions that you might think of when making a paywall. The business agent can help me think through those. But then after I get an idea from the business agent, I might want to get more creative. So maybe the business agent comes up with a very standard solution and it says, okay, I would recommend you to put a monthly subscription and then put the premium features behind the paywall. I'm like, okay, sounds like a valid, reasonable suggestion. But what if I would bring this to my inverter agent? And this is an agent that is prompted to always think outside of the box, to invert a problem, to ask the question, what would we need to do if we wanted to get 10x the solution, or if we wanted to do it in 10 times as little time? Now, the inverter agent might say, instead of trying to put a paywall and just put the exclusive features behind the paywall, how about you just build a new parallel app, put a high price ticket on it, and only go for a small set of premium users, right? It's an idea that seems unconventional, but maybe it might be more effective than doing the standard route. Now, those ideas can be great, but then we actually want to get some extra context. So for this one in particular, you can then take it to the experimenter, and this would be the agent that is really prompted to make good user experiments. So what kind of metrics do we need? What actually measures success? What are the types of biases that humans are prone for, right? Humans, for example, say different things than that they do. Okay, how can you build the doing into the test in such a way that when you validate, you actually know that the thing you hypothesized over here is also the thing that is true? And then lastly, one that I often like to use is a social agent to really try to also understand it from the customer perspective. Because then I might propose this idea and the social agent might say, yes, from a business perspective, that makes a lot of sense. But as a user, if you would do that to me, I would feel tested and I would actually not feel like you are taking me serious and are appreciating me as a human being. You're just treating me as a number in your system. And that is actually going to make me resentful towards your company. So these are all these different angles that normally you would have in a team when approaching problems, when approaching challenges, ideas. And instead of having this conversation with a lot of people, you can have it with the agents, and the agents can also have it with each other, right? So you have always on demand all of these different perspectives that you might need for life, business, and other projects. Now, personally, I have a whole bunch of other agents. I have a skeptic agent, I have a creative agent, a designer agent, all these different agents that have a different role in my personal life. But for this workshop, we're just going to do a very simple 3-agent build. And as we're building the agents, I'm also going to explain some of the technicalities behind Claude itself. So we're sort of easing into it and getting more complex as the build progresses, so that you get to both experience the magic of the agent as well as setting up the ecosystem around it. The first agent that we're going to build is actually not going to be part of the flow, but it's going to be a standalone accountability partner. And this means it's a chat that can help you plan and review your days, your weeks, your months. It can grab items from your calendar, from your note-taking apps, basically anything that you might already be doing on a to-do list or a note-taking app at the moment, but then integrate it into an agentic flow. Then after that, we're going to build a very simple 3-person/agent flow. So the first one is going to be you as a human. And for me personally, I always have a million ideas, product ideas, feature ideas, things that I want to do. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take those ideas and bring it to the inverter. So this agent is going to expand on these ideas. It's going to get way more creative. It's going to 10x. It's going to think outside of the boundaries. At this point, you're probably going to feel a lot of motivation, a lot of inspiration, a lot of energy, because this agent is helping you hyping up your own ideas. So to sort of curb that enthusiasm, the last agent we're going to put this into is called the skeptic. And the skeptic agent is actually the one that shoots holes in all of your plans. And it's looking for all the vulnerabilities, all the ways that you personally might also mess up a project, right? So we're going to give it our personal context so that it has a better understanding of where we have our own personal weaknesses. And it sort of makes sure that, that enthusiasm and those great ideas are curbed, and that we have a more realistic point to jump off from. And as you might see, I like naming my agents, or actually I ask all my agents to name themselves. So Luca and Marco. But this is going to be the basic flow that we're building today. So opening up the sheet over here, first step is to set up a system folder. So basically we want to have a folder on our computer. You can also sync this to the cloud. It can be a Google Drive folder, OneDrive folder, or some other sort of folder in which we're going to be building our entire coaching ecosystem. So just go wherever you want on your computer, and let's say new folder, and you could call it something like coaching ecosystem. Okay, set that whole thing up, and then when we're done, the first thing we're going to do is building our daily accountability partner. Now, the way this works is you can just simply copy this prompt, put it into any new chat, and then the chat will walk you through the building of this actual system. So you can just copy this in, you can open up Claude, and you can either have a standard chat, or what I like to do is straight away go into Cowork, go into Projects, and then choose that folder that we just created. You put that folder in there, and then you simply paste in the prompt. And now the agent, of course, is going to think about this for a little bit. And boom, let's start the interview one question at a time and dig in where needed. So take 5, 10, 30, 60 minutes, whatever you need to just go through this conversation. My recommendation here is the more context you feed it, the better it gets. And just go through this exercise. Okay, so once you've done that, now what we want to do is to actually turn this whole chat into an agent skill. So in Claude, you have these two different ways of structuring information. Most important thing to realize about large language models is that all of it is literally just language, right? So it's all natural language. All the information is essentially the same, but we use different structures, different file formats to make it easier for the LLM to interact with it. But basically, it's all text. The two main ways of organizing information in Claude is that you have skills and you have regular markdown files. So markdown files are static information. They are context. They are information that you need about a given situation to be able to do the thing. So the skill is doing the thing. It is an action. It is describing a certain behavior that you want the agent to have. So let's say, for example, when we turn this accountability partner into an agent, the skill will be, I want you to check in with me every morning. I want you to pull information from my calendar. I want you to give feedback on how I performed this day, right? Those are things that the agent does. But then the markdown is going to be the context, the information that the agent needs to do those things well. So it will need to know, currently, Fran is working on training for a marathon. So the running thing is important. Currently, Fran is trying to move to a different country. Whatever it is that's currently going on in your life. That context informs how the agent behaves, right? It's very similar to a real life coach. Like you can have a really good coach or a really good therapist or a really good professional, but if they don't have the right context, they cannot provide the value for you that would be most impactful. So what we want to do now is once you've had that confirmation, you can simply ask the chat over here. Let me just drag this away a little bit. Great. Now, can we turn that into a skill? Now, since I did not have a whole conversation, it might reject me over here. Yeah, so if you've done the interview, you can now ask it to make a skill, and it will make the skill file for you. If it doesn't do this, you can tell it to run the skill creator skill, which is native in Claude, and then it will definitely work. So sometimes you need to just prompt it a little more specific. You put this skill in there, and then Claude will take your whole interview and turn that into a skill that you can then call in future chats. So let's say, for example, we have created that skill, and I go into a new chat, and I say, workshop accountability. I created this one just for the workshop. I would now load in this skill. And then for this workshop, I put some dummy context in there, but you can now say like, hey, today didn't go that well. Like I didn't have as much energy. It was pretty hard to like get into the work groove. And then the agent automatically calls a skill and starts giving me advice. Hey, it happens. You don't need to push through this. First rule on low sleep days, we don't stack the deck against ourselves. It's really good contextualized advice. So that is basically how you would build the skill. And then inside of Claude, where the skills live is when you go over here to customize. You can see skills, and then inside of here, you can see all of the different skills that I've already created. So you only create them once, and once they live there, you can call them in any future chat. Okay, so that was the accountability skill. Then we can create this one. Then the next one is the creativity partner. So this is the one that helps you be more creative, that helps you think outside of the box, that ideally understands your way of thinking, your way of being creative. And here, once again, the context really helps, right? It's personalized to how you work. So the more you give to the system, the better you explain how you work, the better the output of the system will be. Take this prompt, copy it into your chat, and have the whole interview with the chat, and then install the skill, and then it is a new agent in your ecosystem. Now, what this agent might do, for example, let's say I want to grow on LinkedIn. I want to get a bigger following, but actually I don't like posting on LinkedIn. I'm not really good at writing. I'm not really feeling it. But still, I think or I feel like I need to participate on the platform. So what I can then say is, let's say I would put that issue to the creative agent. I just described to it my LinkedIn issue. And now this agent, as instructed, thinks about it in a different way. It inverses the problem. So instead of thinking about LinkedIn as a publishing platform, it's a conversation platform in disguise. And the people who win on LinkedIn are not the ones posting more, they're the ones commenting more. Thoughtful, generous 2 to 3 sentence comments on other people post in public. So it takes this issue and gives a different perspective. I want to give a caveat here. The perspective is not always good, right? Actually, the perspective is quite often shitty or can still be generic. But by making it generate different perspectives, you can break through that pattern that you might have been thinking in or that the other agent might have been thinking in. And even if 1 out of 10 is good, all your job is to do is to pay attention to the ones that actually resonate and make you feel something, and then build further upon those. Okay, so we create the creative agent, and then we go to our last agent, which is the skeptic. So this is the one that's going to try to shoot holes in your ideas. It's going to be critical, that's going to be realistic, and not from a place of negativity, but from a place of sort of trying to ground you in reality, and actually making things that work and make sense. Once again, similar, you would have the chat, open up a new chat, have the conversation with the agent, go through the interview, take your time for the interview, and then install the skill. And this skill would then look something like this. We could feed it the answer that the other agent gave us. We can take this creative agent answer about the LinkedIn strategy and then put it into the Workshop Skeptic. And we can say, hey, this is what the creative agent said. What do you think about this idea? And we'll just let it canoodle a little bit. And this is great, right? So now this agent is actually going to ground the other agent. The reframe is elegant, there's a truth to it, but the creative skipped the math, and the math is where it breaks. 15 to 20 thoughtful comments, that's realistically 60 to 90 minutes a day. So that is a lot of time and energy that you might be spending on this LinkedIn thing, which might actually be distracting you from your bigger goal. This is something that is super important, and what we're going to do in the next step. The agents will always want to help you. Their only desire is to help you and to support you, which on the one hand is super nice because you have someone that's 24/7 there to help you. But it also means that very often they will indulge you working on something that you shouldn't be working on to begin with. So the creative agent, in this instance, I asked it, I want you to help me with this LinkedIn thing. Instead of saying, hey, you are currently focused on this completely other project. Why are you trying to do LinkedIn outreach? That's like a waste of your time. It straight goes into problem-solving mode. And with the instructions that it got, right? So it's going to invert the problem, think about it differently, whilst in reality, I shouldn't even have been working on that to begin with. So the issue that we have is that our agents need to know what we are up to. They need to know what is happening both currently in our lives and also our common pitfalls and weaknesses. So what we would need for that is to have a central document that has all of the context about us, both our general life and things that are happening at the moment. So this lives inside of a document called Context MD. I'm not going to open it right now because there's a lot of personal stuff in there and I don't want it to be completely out on the interwebs, but this is a massive document, right? It's probably 10 or 20,000 words. And the way I get through this document is actually by going to step 5, which is the shared context doc. So you can once again copy in this prompt and it will ask you questions like, who am I? What are you working on right now? What does a good week look like for me? Now, for the sake of this initial workshop, I made this a very short step, but what I would actually recommend doing is to go to step 9 and copy the mega prompt that is in there and really spend a lot of time on this part of the exercise. Now, full disclosure, anything you share with this chat, of course, will be processed by some American corporation. So only share the things that you are willing to share. Personally, I just put in everything, right? So questions like, what were 3 times you failed at something that you tried really hard at, right? Maybe a project you've been working on for years and you failed. And then ask yourself the question, okay, what was the reason you failed? What were the patterns that were playing out as you were doing that? Same thing for when you meet new people, what makes you connect with them, right? All these very deep and fundamental questions about you. And the more granular and particular you get in here, the better your agents will be able to operate because they know exactly, they don't just look at the pattern like, oh, Fran is now trying to do this LinkedIn strategy. It's looking at, oh, Fran, this guy that is always spread too thin and saying yes to way too many things because he's all over the place, always wants to start new things, wants to move again into a new direction. That is a completely different thing than someone who might have been a writer for 10 years, an author, always just doing books, and now for the first time is going into LinkedIn. The strategy, the recommendations are going to be completely different. And it's all because there's different context behind it. So take this one, then have the chat. And now instead of asking the agent to build a skill, just ask it to turn this document into an MD file and make sure that the chat is connected to the folder that you created at the beginning of the workshop. So this main folder that we created, which in here now is empty because I have my own folder already set up, but the files will all be inside of this folder. So it will start off with just a single markdown file, like, okay, coaching, a context MD, just a context about your life. But then as you're going through these different agents, right? I got all these different agents over here. Then at some point you might have a dedicated business context. You might have a dedicated food tracker context. You might have dedicated design briefs. So all of these files sort of start ballooning out, and you all have them in the same folder. So whenever you ask any of the agents, like, hey, with the design agent, I was working on this new paywall design, can you grab that context and put it into this chat? Then any agent can just go into that folder and grab the context. So rather than having all of the context inside of a chat or inside of a Claude project, you have it in markdown files, which are just very basic text that are living on your computer or in the cloud, which means that it's independent, you own it, and you could always like move over to another system without too much hassle. So that is sort of how you're building up your own ecosystem of knowledge over time. And as this grows, the value of the agents also starts growing. So yeah, I was always a big fan of the building the second brain. I feel now we're really getting to the place for the second brain, because the brain also knows how to retrieve and organize its information. And I can really just query it whenever I need something. Cool. So then we have done that. Then there's a third way for your agent to sort of interact with the world. So we looked at the skills, we looked at the markdown, the context. Now we also have this thing called model context protocols. And they are basically a way to get skills and context from external providers and pull them into your Claude. So let's say, for example, I would want my daily accountability partner to be able to access my calendar. Then over here in the customize section, I can go to connectors, and I can set up my Google Calendar. And over here, you can see it has access to all of these different actions inside of Google Calendar. So it can read all of my calendar events without needing extra permission. And then it can also create calendar events, but there I need to give it approval. And now whenever I'm in this chat, so let me just go open up that workshop accountability. Cool. Can you see what calendar events I have scheduled for today? So now I'm going to ask it the question. And on the right here, you can always see all of the documents and all of the skills and all of the context that your agent has access to. So at the moment, it has just this instruction open. But now you can see it just created also a connection to my Google Calendar. Now, the only reason it can do this is because I first made that connection globally in this customize section, but now the tool is connected, and now I can just ask my chat anything, and it will just query my Google Calendar, look at all the events, but it could also make events on my behalf, right? If I'm like, okay, here are all my AI notes of the day, distill all of the action items, and now plot them onto my calendar, it can do all of those things for me. And just like that, there are many other tools that you can connect over here. You can connect things like your AI note taker, you can connect Notion, you can connect your email. There's a lot of different tools that you can connect, and they will all be accessible from your agent chats. So we connect the MCP. And now to sort of test how the system works, I would invite you to take an idea, take something that you're currently working on, currently struggling with, currently passionate about, and then first feed it to your creative agent. Copy it in there, have the conversation, see what it says, and then take that answer from the creative agent and put it into the skeptic agent. And yeah, just sit with that for a moment. And for me personally, this is always a super powerful flow, because I am always very much a generative thinker, a divergent thinker, and then it really helps to have the skeptic sort of pick out the things that are really relevant for what I'm trying to do right now and sort of ground me a little bit, but still have ideas that I might not have had before I started. So yeah, I hope that gave a good result for you. Then this one I'm going to skip for now. And then the last prompt, I already alluded to this a few times, that I can recommend you doing is this going deeper prompt. So this is actually a very big file. It will take you multiple hours at least to complete. But if you want to build a very comprehensive system and one that really grows with you over time, I can highly recommend trying this out. And then also think for yourself, what agents do you actually want to build, right? Because I just demoed a few that I built, but there's all these different characters, all these different angles, all these different framings and goals that you can embed into your agents. So it's also good to think through what are actually the agents that you will need in your day-to-day life. Now, maybe in closing, a few things to keep in mind when using and building a system like this. I think the first one I already briefly mentioned is that the AI will always want to satisfy you, right? So it's always going to try its best to make you feel good. That's its primary goal. It's there to satisfy you, which on the one hand is very helpful, but it also means you need to always make sure that you push back. So for example, I will very often have like semi-philosophical debates with the AI, just like exploring this philosophical idea. I outline all my arguments, and by the end of it, it almost always agrees with me. So then what I do is I ask it, can you please steelman the other side, right? Can you please argue the other side? And it is remarkably good at this. Whenever you ask it to argue for the other side, it actually knows very well what the other side will look like. And very often it is the case that actually my line of thinking was not the right line of thinking. But had I not proactively asked that, I would have never known. So I very often will ask it to sort of argue things from the other side. And then the other thing to know is that context is everything. So depending on what model you use, there is a specific context window that the AI has access to. So for Sonnet, for example, that's a 200K token context window. For Opus, it's a 1 million K context window. I think Gemini also has 1 million token window. This basically means that anything within that context window, the agent can pull from. But as soon as your context start becoming bigger than that, it's going to forget things that you discussed earlier. Now, 1 million tokens, I think, is around 150,000 words, but there's also like a lot of background processes and everything. So just make sure that you realize that at some point, things you mentioned in the beginning, the agent might forget it. And this is why we structure things in this external context document. And then the last thing that is good to know is that whenever you open one of these chats and whenever you load in your skills, your context, all of these documents, the agent will read it one time at the beginning. But if you are using the same chat a lot, which I'm personally doing because I like just having organized chats on the left, it may mean that when you update a specific piece of context, that your agent hasn't reread it yet. Ideally, it rereads it by itself, but it will not always do this, right? So even if you put the right instructions, even if you explain everything perfectly, it still might not do something or might forget to do something. So I'm afraid my recording software just crashed towards the end there, so I was just gonna wrap it up anyway. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope it helped. Let me know if you have any more questions. And for now, wishing you a wonderful day. Bye-bye.